Welcome to the Real Estate Mailbag. I'm Angie Lawless, and I'm here with my co-hosts Brandon Miller and Steve Morris.
All right, well, I'm going to introduce our panel today. I have some notes here because they all have a lot of great accomplishments, and I'm just going to highlight a few things, and I didn't want to forget. I'm going to start with Brian, hi there, how are you today? And so Brian is the founder of Doorbell Real Estate. He's been active in the Realtors Association at all the different levels. Like if there was a universal level, he would be involved in that. But the local, state, and national levels, he helped launch the National Association of Realtors Young Professional Network and also chaired the Data Strategies Commission in 2015. He was the Realtor of the Year for the Greater Nashville Realtors in 2011, served as the president of the Tennessee Realtors in 2017, founded Rebar Camp Nashville, which is a real estate technology boot camp that they have like 1,500 people there, tons of people. If you've never been, you should go. It's also worth noting that he has been named one of the 100 most influential real estate leaders in America, as well as one of the top 200 power social influencers, which I know is true because a lot of times when I call Brian, he's just before dropping some knowledge on like 5,000 people. So Brian Copeland,
500 people, but
thank you for
5
being
people.
here.
I mean, you're welcome.
Do it. Take it away. Brandon wants to introduce George.
All right. So our second panelist today is George Rowe. George came to the real estate industry from a background in music. Like real deal solo artist, record deal on Michael W. Smith's Rocketown Records, writing, publishing deals with BMG, Sony, and Universal sort of artist, and now serves as the principal broker of Compass's in-town Gulch office, as well as a sales manager for the Tennessee region. George has also served on the board of directors of GNR and the Tennessee Realtors. He has been a chair of the local association's legislative committee and also serves on the state's legislative committee. In addition to also holding undergraduate and law degrees from Pepperdine University, George is generally recognized as a Renaissance man who is also very involved in local charities, including serving on the board of Nashville Cares.
Can I add something?
And Brian's
Okay,
gonna
little
add
known
something.
fact. Little known fact, I came out of the music industry as a publisher, and when he was recording his first album, I pitched him music, and it all got passed on. But I wanted him, I was a huge fan. I was a huge fan of George Rowe when he was on Michael W. Smith's label back in the day. I was.
Lisa Landyn. Lisa, thank you for being here today. Yes, some fans are right there.
I was going to say,
So
the men may be the singers, but Lisa appears to be the star.
So Lisa is the founder, president, and managing broker of the Luxe Collective. You want to do it again? Okay. A local boutique brokerage based in Green Hills that specializes in high-profile clientele such as music industry executives, artists, medical professionals, sports managers, athletes, and published authors. Lisa has been a licensed agent for almost 15 years now and has captured the attention of many real estate observers in Nashville with her often viral social media and innovative marketing events, from Botox and Bellinis to whiskey warmers and Halloween costume parties. She's got a fascinating family history with ties to real estate, including participating in the very first HGTV series Dream House, which involved filming 14 episodes, so she is a star. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, well, there's another star because he was about 1 when we filmed that. Isn't that crazy? I know. It makes me sad. It was really a long time ago.
He had a cute beard back then, too.
Is that your
Actually,
baby?
It's my baby.
Aw.
Well, that's my baby boy, but then the baby is next to him.
All right, Brian, go ahead. Give the shout out for your boy. Today's the day.
Oh, tonight, this is why I have a boot on my leg. We were in New York City filming for an
Blame
ABC
the
TV
kid.
show with my son, which airs tonight. If you're watching this in arrears, good title work. You can stream it live on Hulu. So it's ABC's Generation Gap with Kelly Ripa tonight. You'll see my son and my father on that, and we'll see if they win or not.
Yes, we hear it's really good. Really, really good. Okay, so we're going to start off with a little icebreaker, guys. So aside from your career as a realtor, best or worst job you've ever had?
picking weeds at Al Dolinsky's flower farm in 8th grade for the summer. It was a way to earn some money in 8th grade, and it was awful.
Oh, I was going to say best job, right? You're way too pretty for that, George.
Okay. Picking weeds. So with George. No. Number one was I was a telemarketer back in the 1980s. Where we ripped pages out of the phone book and called people to sell them light bulbs to send unfortunate children to see Beauty and the Beast. It wasn't real, y'all. There was no way. But we were in this hotel and everybody was smoking. And, I'm a Virginia Slims kind of guy and they didn't have them. So, 16-year-old there. So that was my worst job. And then I was the Easter Bunny at Eastel Mall in Knoxville, Tennessee. I got fired because a kid peed on my leg and I kicked him off. Got fired that day. Best job ever.
I don't really
The
have
kid
any
is still
stories.
traumatized.
I don't really have any stories like that. I don't think that I've ever really had a bad job. The best job is probably being mom.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I know. Thanks.
Oh, man, Brian was not impressed with that answer, Lisa. He's like,
I love it.
okay, so we're going to start off with a different section today called Breaking Ground. And this is where we're going to bring you a little market minute update and then also get the panelists to react to a couple headlines that we've chosen. So, Brandon, let's give us your market minute update.
I figure we'll bring in some data here. You can address a little bit later. But okay, the most recent data in the greater Nashville MSA, which includes 9 counties: Cheatham, Davidson, Dixon, Maury, Robertson, Rutherford, Sumner, Williamson, and Wilson. Inventory in May was 9,314 homes, which marked a 60% increase in inventory, which, while significantly below pre-pandemic levels, is still greatly improved, as I'm sure all of our listeners are aware. Pending home sales, there were 3,024 pending home sales. Median price was at $479,900. Absorption rate, which is another way of saying inventory, was at 3.5 months. There were 3,436 closings in May, which was 2,736 single-family, 507 condominiums. This compared to 3,982 in May of 22, which was a 13% decrease in overall sales and closings. Davidson County, the median home price was up 7.6% to $495,000 since January of 22. So that's obviously great news. And the average mean price was up about 5% to $678,726.
So, Brandon, how many closings did you say there were? How many?
Total closings, 36.
We did about a third of those. Is that about right?
Maybe a little less.
Okay. Next month.
All right, so thanks, Brandon, for that. So, okay, headline. So the first one, 40 game-changing ChatGPT prompts every agent should use. I think I actually posted this one on LinkedIn yesterday or earlier this week. So if you haven't seen it, great article, but it was in Inman. So ChatGPT, all things, as these guys are all brokers, give us your thoughts.
Well, I'm a Google Bard user, which is an AI plugin, and then I'm also Adobe just released their new generative fills. So I've not been a fan of ChatGPT overall because I've not been impressed with what it can do completely. I think what we've got to be careful with in our industry is when we lean too much on machine learning to put out things that go straight into the MLS. We're starting to see fair housing violations that ChatGPT wrote because it doesn't know that you can't say that. And then also you can tell someone posted something on Facebook the other day, and it's kind of like using a filter. You know, you see somebody and you're like, you ain't got two front teeth. Where'd you get those teeth? And they're like, well, I canvassed them in or whatever. And then you see they can't make a complete sentence on Facebook yesterday, and then they write something amazing. And I wrote this agent, I was like, well, boy, that was ChatGPT. And you can tell. So, I mean, realize that this has got to fall into your brand. if you hear me talking all fancy, it ain't me. That's not me talking. If it's not personal. So we got to be really careful when we're using these kind of things from two standpoints. One, as a personal standpoint, when we become so programmed that we turn our personality into a Snapchat filter where we don't even look like ourselves, even when we talk. And the second piece is a compliance piece where we just got to be careful what we're putting out there in the world.
I agree. And you also have to spell check because those things do not do that for you. So always, I'm a big stickler on proofreading and errors. So if anybody ever sees an error on please tell me. I want to know because that just drives me crazy.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point.
You've also got to check for accuracies. You can't just cut and paste because I've seen people do that and the output says that there's a pool in the backyard when in fact it's a pool in the neighborhood of Berry Farms, not in the backyard of the house. And so you can't just copy and paste. You really got to proofread. On the other hand, I think it's a great way to spur creativity. I mean, when you formulate those prompts, you've got to really hone in on the issue and who your target audience is and what the output you want to be, and it forces you to go through this discipline of understanding your audience and your work and the property you're marketing, and you fine tune that, and it makes you more knowledgeable on whatever the subject is.
Yeah. And a lot of the agents don't know that when, like, I love Adobe's generative fills. They're amazing. You can change skies. Now that we're paying Box Brownie $4 to do, you can now do that for free in Photoshop if you own Photoshop. You can now make your grass greener, but you got to remember that Code of Ethics says that if you do that, you have to post the before and after photos. Even for virtual staging, you have to do that. You can't remove power lines. So we're starting to see people use AI to remove power lines. That is a legal and an ethical violation. So just be aware when you're using these kind of programs. Use them. I love some of them, and we're going to see where they go, but just be careful.
I actually think that's a really great point that I would think both of what you're saying and also, George, what you're saying about the pool is the downside seems to me that if you are representing a buyer, you may actually have to drive by some of the homes or like do a little extra work to make sure that there is actually a pool. Or if you think, oh wait, I didn't know that house, I don't remember driving by and seeing a pool, you might have to just fact check a little bit more. Interesting.
Well, I have something. I want to say something about the power lines because this came up with a buyer of mine. So the pictures, how the agent had them posted, I look through window. Like when I look at a picture, I look through everything. I'm just scared. I just want to make sure it's all, on the up and up when I take my clients somewhere. But you could see power lines, but you really couldn't tell how close they were. So I called and I said, how close are those power lines? Because I don't see a picture that, And he goes, well, you know what? If they're in the backyard, it's great. And I'm like, what? And I go, well, I'm sure they're not going to be in their backyard the whole time. And he's like, well, they're in the front. I'm like, oh my goodness. Why not just, it's crazy. So needless to say, we did not go see that house because the other side was power lines.
And you did your research beforehand.
Yes. But
All right, so another story. This one is from the Nashville Business Journal, and its title is "The Productivity Problem: The Future of In-Office Mandates Looms Large." And so what this article was about is, the last 3 years, there's been a big trend toward working from home. Recently, we've been seeing a lot of headlines of CEOs saying, all right, guys, time to come back to the office. A couple of questions about that. Like, what have you seen in the Nashville market? Like, do you think that Nashville has benefited from working from home? How do you think that's going to change when people start going back to the office? And then also, as advice for other agents, do you think working from home is a positive for an agent? Is it good to be in an office? Like, what's your advice for that?
I'll go. So, as we all probably know, agents aren't in the office all the time. I love it when they're there. One, because I have someone to talk to. But two, because I think it's just great when you have realtors together bouncing ideas off of it. You need that. I was told that a long time ago, and it's really true. Because you can forget things, and you don't know everything, and it's good to have somebody else in the office with you. But I don't know that that's going to be a whole turnaround for the market. I don't know.
Well, I think it is. I think we saw a huge turn. Most of the people I was showing homes to in 2020, I'm mainly a buyer's agent while I'm also a broker, they said no open floor plans. They wanted compartmentalization. We went back to the 1960s and 70s when a 7x8 room was a big deal. They wanted that private space. Anytime I would show a place, they were like, "No, there's no place for me to work." So I think we will see a relisting of homes here probably in the next 2 years once they start, once their escalation clauses catch up with appreciation, and then we'll see a back to open floor plans because that home office space was a huge deal. The return to work piece, I think a lot of people think, well, why can't realtors go in? Because we're 1099 employees. That's something that NAR has fought to preserve. That Christy Harrison, who's in the audience, can tell you today a lot about. Also, because that's one of the things that make us unique as realtors. You can't tell us what to do. As a broker can have policies, but we cannot enforce certain workplace things because of legal situations. So I think that we're going to see agents. I don't have agents in my office. That's the way we're set up. One of my best friends in the whole wide world, who's been one of my agents for years, he went to a traditional broker who has an office. I signed his release yesterday, and because he wants to be back in the office with energy of people. He says my production is hurting because I don't have that synergy. So I think agents, if you are sitting home listening to this and you aren't venturing back out with people, you've got to get out of your homes, get back in a class, get to a brokerage that offers a ton of classes, that has great brokers like what you see up here today, and get with them, because that's what's going to give you that energy. You only give out what you're putting into yourself. And when you're putting yourself in situations where you're around positive realtors, positive brokers, positive environment and culture, that's going to help your productivity soar.
I'm a huge fan of being in the office, and ever since I got licensed from day one, I would go in, and sometimes I'd be the only agent in there. But I think there's value in learning from overhearing, from osmosis, from bouncing ideas off of each other. There's learning opportunities. There's coaching opportunities. And we, like Brian said, we've got independent contractors that work at our brokerages, so we can't compel them to be in the office, but we encourage it, and I think it drives culture, which is so important, especially coming out of the pandemic when we weren't going in the office. And we encourage them to be involved in sales meetings and to raise their hand and to be involved and engage and to teach and to share best practices. And I think everyone wins when everybody's participating together like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And George, your meetings are like a TV show anyway. They're beautiful. But the three of us actually have, Brandon and I have always shared an office, and even when we built our new office, we all three share an office, and largely for the same reasons that you guys said. We over here, I'll be like, oh, hey, did you talk to Jennifer about that? I talked to somebody else about that. I think this may be the other side. What, we just can vibe off of each other and be like, oh, wait, there was a deal that you heard that was like that. Now I've got one. How can we best strategize? So I totally agree with that. Okay, next section is path to profits. So you going to do a question? What are you going to do?
Oh, yeah. Oh, dude.
Oh, actually, we're going to stay on this, and Brandon?
Okay, so one big topic is, there's a lot, financial news, mainstream news is really interested in real estate right now. Every day there's 14 different stories about where interest rates are headed, where prices are headed, whether rates are going to come down. Where do you all go for your main source of news to really kind of cut through the noise and really have an astute, informed view of the real estate market?
I've got several. Inman is a go-to. Tennessean, National Business Journal. I love Richard Courtney's article. I'm ashamed to say that I love Curbed, which is sort of the People magazine of real estate. It's entertaining. Yeah, the Tennessee Realtors Digest every Monday always has some good information in it too. But I think it's important to read from several different sources to make sure you've got a good macro and micro understanding of the market.
I'm a big believer in being the news. I mean, and that may sound silly, but there's nothing worse than getting statistics and not knowing the skewing data behind it. So I think your very best source for news is your local MLS. You've got to get in there and start pulling reports. You've got to see, why is the median price now the 400? Because Broad West closed a ton of units, like with Wagon Wheel. If we start looking at data that month specifically, when y'all were closing Broad West like crazy, that skyrocketed that zip code. If I'm doing absorption rates to say, oh, seller in West End Park, your condo's going to sell in 3 days based off of this, then I'm failing as a news consumer because I don't know the outlier. And so that's that's the issue we run into with news all the time when we're seeing data news. We go, well, what is that? Well, there was a $2 million closing in Cleveland Park, but it was 25 units. That's not going to skew that high enough. So for me, I'm a very skeptic news consumer. I love the bubblegum stuff like you love. I love Apartment Therapy. I love Curbed. I think Chicago Agent Magazine does some really nice stuff. I will not read certain news sources. I'm not going to say who because they are about clickbait and they try to get you. There's a lot of lenders out there who are doing sensationalized podcasts who say things against the market, things against the industry just to get a click, and then they rile up a fan base that they just need to breathe in Jesus and breathe out love. It's just a big old hot mess. So you just got to be careful what you're consuming, but I think you are the best news that you can have. You got to talk to your consumers. You've got to be in touch with your neighborhood associations, read your Facebook pages. That is your best source of news.
That's what I was going to say, social media. I agree with all the other ones, but social media, oh my gosh.
TikTok's great.
I'm a
know.
huge fan of curating it too, using Google News or Apple News, and just drop in keywords that you want to follow, industry terms, people, even yourself, to see what's in the news about you. But I like curating my own news sources as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And where else am I going to see Chrissy Teigen's baby boy's new hair if I'm not reading people like sources, right? Okay, so now we're going to move on to Path to Profits, which is about where our panelists will give gifts, not give gifts, but they might. They're going to give, tips and ideas for kind of how to up your game and how to be more profitable as an agent. So the first question is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given. And if you want to go in life, I'm sure that will also help in the realtor career. If you want to go real estate, we'll take it all.
And were we talking about the best advice we would give or the best that we've just we've received?
Received.
We will go there too.
But if you've got some advice that you want to give that you think is powerful.
No, I'm just thinking through, yeah.
I was just going to say the best advice that I was given a long time ago was to listen to your clients and form that relationship. Don't treat it as a transaction only. And I can honestly say I think that maybe there's one or two bad apples all this time, but for the most part, I'm still in touch with all the people that I've done deals with. So
Who are the bad apples?
I'm not saying. Oh, that's good, juicy. Maybe I'll post that. I'll post something about that. Maybe.
One of the best pieces of advice I got was actually from you, Brian. It was when I first got in the industry, and I knew Brian was a leader, and so I asked if we could meet for lunch, and I just wanted to know some tips and advice and best practices, and you were showing property in Franklin, so you had me meet you at Puckett's down in Franklin. And the advice you gave was to get involved. And that's the same advice that Cher Powers gave me also. Cher invited me to lunch at Smiling Elephant one year and said, you need to get involved. You need to raise your hand, show up, be a leader. And that has paid off in dividends in my success as a realtor and a broker.
I guess the best advice I ever got was always work on your business every day, even when you don't have a client or something to do. And you say, well, I don't have anything to do. What do I do? Go into the tax records and start pulling tax records and see who's buying land. Find out the patterns and say, who are these people? And then go stalk them. And then find out who they are. And that's how some of my first deals came from, because it was like, oh my gosh, you knew that we were doing this? I was like, yes, I can see you're assembling property. What are you doing? And because I was reading tax records, I got into Nashville.gov and I would just pull spreadsheets out. That's all free. And I would start sorting it. I would drive neighborhoods and I would take a map with me and I'd start in Cleveland Park. I'd go up North 6 and I would do a green dot if it was something I would love to list one day. I'd do a red dot if I wanted to stay the hell away from it. And I'd do a yellow dot if I was like, we might do this. And then I'd go through the green dots and I'd see if they were having yard sales. I had nothing better to do. And so don't sit there and say, well, my broker, George, didn't bring me any leads today. It's not his job to bring you leads. It's his job to answer the questions and to make sure you stay out of trouble when you're shining out there. But you've got to set up your own spotlight to stand in. And so find out what you're passionate about. That was huge advice to me. And even when I was bored and I didn't want to do that stuff, I was out looking at yard sales and estate sales and doing everything I could to drum up business.
I love that. I was also just thinking your telemarketing background must have helped.
You want a light bulb? You want to buy a light bulb to send a underprivileged child to Beauty and the Beast? Yeah.
You're so good at that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not good at that either. It was awful.
Okay, this question's a little bit similar, but what's one thing that you do or have done that you think has led to your success, as a realtor or as a broker, which are, I think, also very different roles?
I think it's important to be coachable and to be a learner, and I have no reservations at all about picking up the phone and calling somebody else whose opinion I value. It's often yours, but it's been Brian's, it's been Price's, it's been Richard Courtney's. I remember when I was considering this opportunity to be the broker at Compass, Richard Courtney and I were grabbing drinks at Bricktops, surprise. And I asked Richard, what do you think about this? What do you think about me moving into this broker role over at Compass? And he said, don't do it. You don't want to be a broker. I'm getting out of the job, and I'm going back to selling full time. And there was wisdom, and he gave me a heads up on some of the things challenges I'd have. But I think it's important to be coachable and learnable no matter where you are.
Now, just being there for the agents, I think, is a big deal. Answering your phone. I don't think if I miss your call, I'm calling you back within 5 minutes or texting you or, and I think they all feel pretty comfortable coming.
And Lisa, tell us about your social media in that, because I know that's, from the outside looking in, that appears to be a big part of your success these days. You're good at it.
Crazy. Thanks. See, I told you. Kids never want to admit if you're good at something. But that just kind of took off last year after the Parade of Homes. So one video just did it, and it's been great. But I've learned a lot. So not even a year. Oh, I told you. I gave you guys a little tip last time. I can't give away all my secrets.
Well, I'll tell you my secrets then. So, George has talked a lot about agency and brokerage. You've talked a lot about broker piece. I'll tell you about from an agent standpoint about success. And don't do a job. We all hate work. Do what you love, and your job should fit into what you love. That's the biggest secret to this. I love graphic arts. I love meeting people. I love taking pictures of people. I love archiving. I love sharing with people. So my lead generation stopped me getting up the phone and calling people, sending out expired, withdrawn campaigns. I stopped all that. I said, can I take pictures of your family for absolutely free? I learned how to take the best pictures in the world. When people, didn't even sell their home. I would go to their kids' baseball games and shoot photos of them and say, here you go. And then put them out on their private Facebook groups where they could have them. And then it started matriculating into, I walked into one house just as a story in Madison, and they said, you don't know us, but that picture that's on our counter right now, you took that photo of our son when he was 11 years old. He's going to college on a full scholarship, and we use that as his demo cover, that photo. That has been his, and we want to say thank you, and we're going to have you work as our buyer's agent. They ended up buying a house that I got to list because I'd taken a picture of the people's childhood home, and there were no photos out there, and I sent them the raw original files, and they had it exploded up to a huge piece of art on their walls, and they said, we're listing this with you because you took a photo and posted it in a Facebook group. I have over 53,000 photos on Flickr. GQ magazine has used them. TV shows have used them. Adoption agencies have used them, because I'm sharing what I love to do. When you focus on what you love more than anything, business will come, because people are attracted to people who do what they love. And so I've learned to meld and harmonize all the things I love into lead generation. And if everything you're doing does not fall into something that you enjoy doing, just stop doing it. You're just not going to be happy, and being happy is what's going to make you successful.
Amen. I love that. Me again. Okay, so this last one is around the wheel, and this, thanks Brian for the idea, but this is where we're going to present a couple of scenarios that we've encountered, and also a mailbag question at the end. And we're going to get these guys' reaction to it, things that we don't necessarily, we have practices, but we want to know how other brokerages see it, how they like doing things, and there could be different right opinions on it.
Okay, so this first question has to do with keys. So a really awkward and fear-inducing moment is right at the end of the closing. If all parties in the room look at the title person and say, "Where are the keys?" Because the answer is always, "I don't know." There's never any other answer. And so just to kind of set it up, so in Middle Tennessee, we have a lot of split closings. That means that we might be closing for the buyer, a different title company might be closing for the seller. So sometimes the buyer's agent tells the buyer, whenever we've done signing, after you've paid, you should go over to the house, the keys will be there, and that's fine. Sometimes they get the message, hey, the seller doesn't want you to have keys until the money's been released. One is kind of a practical approach. This stuff is all going to happen in the background. The other is a little bit more legalistic approach, like you don't own it till I've been paid. We just want to get your thoughts, like how do you advise your agents to handle those situations, and what do you want us to tell people?
I'll give the keys until it's funded. Bottom line, that's what we've done.
Yeah, I've got two very strong and conflicting opinions on that. One is the legalistic approach, and I've seen it from lessons learned the hard way. And I was another brokerage a few years ago, and the buyer's agent told the buyers, "Here's the keys at our final walkthrough. Just take them. Closing's tomorrow at 9 a.m. What could possibly go wrong?" And the buyer went over the next morning. On their way to closing, stopped at the house and brought some stuff in the garage and put stuff on the kitchen counter. And the sellers had the utilities turned off in their names, and the buyers had them turned on that day. And little did they know that the burner of the stove was slightly turned on. And so one of the cardboard boxes that was placed on the counter was also slightly touching the burner, and the entire house burned down within an hour between them dropping the boxes off on their way to closing. They left closing, went to the new house, saw fire trucks and ambulances, and thought, "What's going on?" Stopped the funds. We're not going to fund this. Somebody burned down this house that we just built. Little did they know they were guilty of criminal trespass and arson and lots of other things. And so that's how I would escalate it as the seller. So on one hand, never, absolutely not.
Wait, what happened?
Insurance. The buyer's insurance covered it. Yeah. The buyer's insurance did. Yeah.
But they went ahead and funded it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They had. Yeah.
Because at that point, I think until they'd funded it, risk of loss had not passed. So technically, it was.
Yeah, but they burned down the house, and so otherwise, the consequences would have been trespassing, arson. So. And then on the other hand, if I'm doing a deal with Brian, who I know really well, I'll just say, hold on to the keys. Don't give them to your buyers yet until I give you the okay. And so much of this business is about relationships too. And so somebody like Brian, or at least I'm going to trust them to do the right thing with the keys and just ask that they hold off on giving them until it's time.
Yeah, I think we have a very different culture in Tennessee. If you're in Washington State, you close and then you wait up to a week before you even take possession. So my friends up there are closing properties, and then the sellers don't even move out until they have fully funded and they have a full occupancy that they're not paying for, okay? So we're kind of privileged in Tennessee in the fact that we think when we sign the paper that it's closed and they can have the keys, when technically I know another burn down situation that happened off of West End where the seller's insurance had to cover it because it hadn't funded yet. And so it got this legal, for those of you listening today, I'm with 4 attorneys up here, because George is an attorney too, so I'll always defer to them on this. Our textbook answer, as George has already said, but I think also the evolution of lot boxes matter now, and we've as an industry got to talk about this, about what is appropriate. And I think this is something, while we don't collude ever, I think in issues like this is a big issue, that it's not fair to a title company if you're sitting there and that buyer and the agents didn't even come to the showing, to the closing, and they say, where are the keys? And you don't know, because that makes you look like an idiot. Because ultimately, you're the person. Yeah, you do. Because you are
that happened yesterday.
You are the concierge to my new house. And I have billed you now as the realtor as part of my team, and you don't know what the heck is going on. Okay, so now they're leaving with a bad taste in their mouth. So we as an industry have got to get around this to where we got to look at the evolution of lot boxes. We got to look at the evolution of relationships, and how do we have a standard, because I think the standard should be keys at closing, honestly, that you guys have, and they don't go until they're funded. And I don't like that answer.
Yeah, I mean, we've had that before, mostly on new construction. Builder gives us the keys, and then we say, look, we'll let you know when they're ready to be picked up.
And you're the bad guy.
It's not totally smooth that way either, right? Because they have to come back.
That's what I was going to say. They have to come back. They don't hang out and wait for funding to occur.
Because who knows, with the way that we have these split closings in Tennessee, I mean, the other side might not close until later, and you can't dictate that. So you just have all of these things, and you're right, though, Brian, I think, to what's the best experience for the buyer, and maybe it is, you come back the next day and it will all be good. No one likes to hear that, but I don't know.
Well, no, I've heard y'all say that, because I've had to call Steve on some things where I'm like, Steve, you busted your tail on this, but Steve's like, it's in the buyer's best interest to keep it simple, and this may be a better option, and that doesn't necessarily help Wagon Wheel, because you guys are looking out for the interest of the best for the consumer, which also it's not necessarily always in your best interest, and that's why I love about using you guys, is I know that it's not going to be, y'all aren't doing this because you just want to make money. You're doing it because you care about people, and at the end of the day, how they feel about that brand. When people say Wagon Wheel, they go, yeah. My sellers who closed with y'all yesterday, I text them this morning, they're like, we got our funding already. They were just like, and they remembered the previous closing y'all did with them, and they were like, and that's why it was all set up because I'm part of your partnership here, and if I'm not setting y'all up for success, and if you're using any title company today listening to this, you need to be setting up your title company for success, because they're the ones taking the blows for you at closing when you don't know what the answers are.
And our job, the way that we see it, is to make you guys look like stars by taking extra care of your clients, because in the end, that's how the whole thing, that's how we all do well. So thank you for that, Brian. Brandon, give us our next scenario.
The market standard has largely shifted from brokerages holding earnest money to the title companies holding earnest money.
Boo!
Praise the Lord.
Oh, amen. Yeah.
And as I know, you all will be shocked to know, sometimes there's disputes over earnest money. So most title companies, will not release the earnest money unless there is a release signed by the buyer and the seller, agreeing to the release. Either one party gets it, the other party gets it. Maybe there's some split of the baby here. Sometimes, though, one of the parties will simply not cooperate. They will not sign anything. They have no incentive to sign anything. What do you think the title company is handling, kind of in the middle? How should we handle this situation?
Help us out, guys.
So that part of the contract, line 169 to 185, talks about disbursement of earnest money and how it gets handled. And option A is to apply it to the buyer's credit. Option B is with a signed release, but option D is upon a reasonable interpretation of the contract. And if it is clear that the other party is just not signing if all the conditions have been met, or whatever the reasons are that it should be released, if it's just clear, undisputable, I will write an email to the broker and CC the attorney and just kind of outline, this is what's happened and all the conditions have been released. There's no other way to interpret this. And by the way, the prevailing party wins court costs here. And so do you really want to go to interpleader? I mean, just the reasonable thing here to do is per Section D, just release it.
Because the other broker could say yes, and then it would be, we could at least have the two brokerages to say, okay, they both agree. And I think we would be comfortable in that case releasing.
Well, Tennessee, we have statewide forms. Not every state has statewide forms. If you're in Alabama, I was buying a house in Alabama, and I couldn't get the form for the local marketplace. That's how bad it was, because my realtor was in Huntsville, not in Hartselle. So we're very lucky in Tennessee to have standard forms, but forms are in place just as tools and guides for you. They are not the end-all be-all. That release of buyer of earnest money is a form or a tool for you to use to where the paperwork is clear. According to the digest that George mentioned earlier, you do not have to have all parties sign that to release earnest money per the Tennessee attorneys. However, if you look under default, the scariest part of that contract, which is beautifully numbered, number 13, it's the scariest part of the contract. It says in the case of default that you can keep the earnest money, but it also says that you could sue them. They had already moved into an assisted living home. You're going to have to pay for that assisted living home. They already paid for a cross-country move. They're going to sue you for that $12,000 move. So Steve ended up on a phone call with me the other day in this very situation, and the contract had defaulted because they just didn't close. They did not close. It was the 29th. The contract was to close on the 27th. It was cut and dry. The agent was not signing it. And I looked at the broker with Steve right there and said, so here's the deal. This is just a document that releases your agent, who's also the buyer, from the liability under Section 13. They don't have to sign it, but understand that once we keep the earnest money, my person may come after them because y'all didn't sign. When my people signs this bilateral agreement, not a unilateral agreement, that is a bilateral agreement of that release. So now we both said we're letting you out of default at this point. Once that's signed, I think that would work really well in court if somebody were to say, hey, you already signed the release on that. Because that, if you read that release, it's not just about earnest release. It's about the terms of the contract too. And so usually those are things you have to remember. The notification form that's in the forms, that's a unilateral piece. It only has one signature on it. It's not back and forth on that. So yeah, y'all are in a bad place holding earnest money. There's no, y'all have to decide. You're the owner, and if they say we have to have all signatures, that's what we're going to do. If they refuse to sign and y'all don't want to release it, then they're going to have to go through the whole mediation and interpleader process at that point.
This is why we don't hold earnest money. Our brokerage. That was one of the first decisions I made. I'm like, nope, that's not going to happen.
That was a smart decision, Lisa.
And is the name of your company Wagon Wheel Title and Escrow, or is it just Title?
It is.
And Escrow?
We have a DBA though, Brian.
Clear.
Yeah.
Clear.
I mean, it is really tough, right? Because, and then for us, I mean, I had, someone that I wasn't working with the other day who called and asked us to release it because our client was not signing off. And you don't want to be like the person who's saying no, but you're also trying to protect and you may not have all the facts. And so I said, well, can you tell me, do other companies just typically release with only like one signature? Like I can't hear, I don't even know all the facts, but my client's telling me otherwise. And, she was like, well, no. And I was like, well, then, I don't know. It's just it's a case-by-case sort of thing, I think, and it's very hard, as you guys.
If the earnest money is $1,000, that's very different from when the earnest money is $100,000, and the stakes are much higher.
If I've never said thank you for holding our earnest money.
Oh, you're welcome, Lisa. Anytime, seriously.
Submit earnest money through the button on our website, EM Deposit.
That's true. That's true. Just as a quick little thing about that, at the top of our website, some of you guys have heard this so many times, but there's a little button that says like EM Deposit. Your clients go there. If they put in your email address, it will notify you of when we receive it, when it's good, and those sort of things automatically. So it's just a bonus because you're not having to call and say, did you get the earnest money? Can I have a copy of it? All those things that take extra time and are money to you. Okay, mailbag question time. What do you got, Steve? Mailbag.
Mailbag question.
We need a jingle.
It's the mailbag.
As Brian pointed out, he's like, it's called the real estate mailbag. You need a mailbag question. And I'm like, you know what? That's a great point. Okay, so
We'll edit this part out.
right. So mailbag question. So I had a client who wanted to sell an STR. So everyone here probably knows an STR. That is a property with a short-term rental permit. The STR was currently held in an LLC, and it was an R-zoned property. Okay, so what that matters is R-zoned properties, you used to be able to get a short-term rental permit. Now you cannot. So if you lose the permit, you can never get it back. I wanted to list that property on the MLS for sale, and my broker said that not only could I not list it on the MLS, our brokerage wouldn't take the money from the transaction because it's not the sale of real estate. I feel like I see other agents doing this. So how are other brokerages handling this issue? A couple things. Three things. Do you allow it? What do you want to call your fee, commission or otherwise? And do you think I should list the property on the MLS?
Oh, this is so exciting.
I mean, MLS just people misread a new guideline saying that you could, so you can't sell an LLC within the MLS. MLS, Multiple Listing Service, LLC, Limited Liability Corporation, since we got so many acronyms going here, because we are in the business, like in a 1031 exchange, of real property, okay? And we don't sell furniture. We don't sell, and that's part of those LLC pieces, is you've got short-term rental pieces, the licenses, all that stuff. So to answer the question, I would say, excuse my French, no to my people. No, you will not list this. I had a phone call from a buyer yesterday that he's like, well, every agent I've talked to, you're the first to say this, because they were just going to go buy a random house and put an Airbnb in there, and every agent told them they could do it. Every agent they spoke with. And he probably won't use me because I didn't give him what he wants to hear. And this goes back to a leadership issue. If you have a broker who's saying go ahead, you're at the wrong place, because you tell them it's going to end up sued, and you don't want to go through a lawsuit. It's a nightmare. You have to turn over all of your text messages. You have to print off everything. It's worse than a proctology appointment. You don't want to do it. So if you have a broker who's saying go ahead and sell it, no. You can't list it in the MLS. You can't be saying this will go as a short-term rental. There's new zoning classes that short-term rentals have to be in certain areas. There's owner-occupied, there's non-owner-occupied. There's a lot of pieces in there. And as a broker, I'm just not comfortable touching those pieces when an agent is misrepresenting it. We're in a situation right now with an attorney who bought one that we looked at them and said, you cannot short-term rental this. He didn't care. He didn't listen. And now he's in a situation where he can't rent it out that way, and it has been busted on it. So, but we didn't know what he was doing. So, caution.
Agreed with all that.
I say call Wagon Wheel.
Well, okay, what about this, Brian? So we have said before, and we always preface it with, talk to your broker. We've mostly done it in CE settings where the broker's been there. But our thought is, this RM20 property, it's got the permit. Obviously, the value is more because of the permit. But we've said, well, you don't have to, you are selling a company if the permit transfers. But if you list it on the MLS and you said that it's possible to have a sale of that company, but the sale is for the property at that rate, is that permissible?
What's going to put in the MLS? I mean, everything that's in the MLS, while there's disclaimers at the bottom that says this information is not deemed reliable, ultimately, if you're standing in a court of law and you have that information in your realtor remarks or in your public remarks saying this STR approved property, you're saying it can be approved. What if Metro Council goes out and changes those guidelines?
What if I say this permit is held in an LLC. The seller is willing to, the seller's willing to discuss this. And then if they do decide, if you call you, Brian, my client wants to do the STR, they want to buy the LLC, you take it off the MLS at that moment because you know that you were doing a deal with the LLC, but you used it to say, I'm marketing this property that has the potential with the LLC. Can it be on the MLS for the marketing part at that point?
I think there's a strong argument to say if you're just listing property and it's just property, I'm not a furniture salesperson. I am not a refrigerator salesperson. I am not a grandma's chandelier from 1827 that's going to be in the garage salesperson.
Light bulbs only.
Okay?
Light bulbs only.
I'm not that salesperson. I sell real property that's legal. I can't answer that question because they need to have a business person in there because there's a business piece of it and there's a real property piece of it. We are experts in real property. That's what we sell. If you are an expert in selling Airbnbs, go for it. Go for that liability. But I don't know of the major amount of brokers in the city who can do both. So to me, it's a separate piece. And to answer the question directly, I don't know because it shouldn't have been in the MLS as a guaranteed STR. It starts with that seminal error because we cannot guarantee anything when it comes to the short-term rental world. Am I right or am I wrong?
Exactly right.
And that's
Yeah.
why RealTrax doesn't have that as a filter, which a lot of people have asked for. Is this STR-able? It's because we don't know when those rules are going to change around that.
I don't even want to represent square footage. I don't want that in there. I mean, because it's measured 10 different ways, and I ended up with 300 off the other day, and then it turned into this. What are we going to do? I don't like any of that. Go. The buyer should check it all.
What a little wrinkle on that. If you have an agent that's, you got an agent who has a listing and the seller, their client, is open to selling the property fully furnished, say not STR, is that a note that can be ethically in the MLS? That the seller is open to selling all the furniture? So I think that's analogous to the situation.
Ethically, or does it comply with the RealTrax rules? I mean, those could be different things.
Is it okay with you, George?
To me, that's a bill of sale. That's a yard sale that they're taking care of on the side of buying a piece of real estate, and it should be handled separately.
But can it be on the MLS to have a note that says that?
I don't know. I don't know the RealTrax rule on that.
I think that's something that would be helpful, and maybe we can reach out to get some guidance on, because I think there are people who are saying, let's say like you guys might say, we don't want that liability at all in our brokerage. So if it's got that to it, you sell the property, you make no note about it, and you move on. I think there are other brokers who say, if you want to put a note in the MLS that says there's a potential for this, you can. But if you see it going down that path, you have to pull it off. But I think it would be good to get some clear guidance on it. But I love, do any of your, I think Brian, the answer is no for you. Do any of your agents do these things, the membership interest purchase agreement deals?
No.
Not one of my agents does anything wrong or questionable ever.
Mine either.
Right.
They're great.
Yeah, but they're not permitted through Compass. That
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. So let's see.
About that though, when it has that, I've seen that lately though, throwing in furnished, and because then the client comes back and goes, well, how much can I get off the price of the house if I don't take that furniture? Where's the value? So that starts a whole other issue.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, give us a couple sentences on how you think each of your brokerage is unique, and how any of our listeners interested can reach out to talk to any of you all for more advice, or potentially they're looking for a brokerage, or maybe looking to move brokerages.
Well, I think Compass is different in that it's such a tech-driven brokerage that's been using AI for years on its platform, all done so to help an agent grow their business exponentially more than they might anywhere else. And we see that agents growing their business from 10 million best year to 50 million the year that they join Compass by leaning into technology. And also the culture is something that's really important, that's prioritized. I love this collaborate without ego culture that's at Compass, and you've been to our sales meetings, and we have agent panels who will share best practices or mistakes and opportunities to learn, and it's fun, and we have live music and sometimes, and I think that creates this rising tide lifts all boats kind of mentality that everybody benefits from. Going back to your earlier question about in-person attendance, I think that that's something we encourage, and we see the benefit of that by agents getting involved, being present, raising their hand, and showing up.
Well, we're a small brokerage, so there's 14 agents, and I think probably one of the best things about us is we're more we're just like a little family. Any of them will do something for another agent. If somebody needs like, help me out here, they don't need to be paid. That was another thing. That was an issue at my last brokerage. Well, how much are you going to pay me to go show that house? Well, nothing. Like, this is going to happen again. You're going to need that favor. And so they're all really good about that, and which is great.
You wait until your kids start soccer.
Well, I kind of take a different approach because I'm all about getting happiness. If you're not happy, then you're not going to be able to sell. And what made me happy was not having a lot of agents because I'm going to tell y'all are difficult to work with, and I'm going to tell you right now. You're a brand liability when you go out on social media and say something stupid that gets us all in trouble.
Mine are all perfect.
And but we've all seen brokerages who do this. And in my opinion, and again, not bashing any other brokerage, hear me clearly. I love you all of you. I love you, but I don't think I can properly supervise more than a certain number of agents. And my job as a broker in the state of Tennessee are to make sure that my agents are concierge handled and they are compliant. They're legal, and they are professional. And I cannot do that for 300 agents at one time. And anyone who can, please show me how you do it legally and ethically. So for me, I'm not looking to be a licensed factory for people. So it's not a recruiting piece for me because I want you to go somewhere where you're happy. And you may be very happy with George and Christy at Compass because the culture is so amazing. You may be happy with Luxe and you do luxury property and you want to be in the Green Hills area. It's going to be what makes you happy. Just remember, the grass isn't always greener. We're at a market change right now, and we're going to start seeing people start leaving brokerages. It's going to be I expect in the crystal ball people to start leaping brokerages because they think this grass is greener. The grass isn't greener. You can be greener, though. You got to find your own green where you are and be happy where you are. And if you're not happy, then look at the place that's going to give you happiness for a long time, because people changing brokerages every 2 years is not good for your own joy and happiness.
Ooh, I love that. The happiness thing really gets me, because when we started, it was like one thing, like I do not want to get in an elevator to go to my office. It's a sterile thing. So no elevators. So I love the happiness thing. Okay. No, it's not it. One last one.
There is one more thing. I don't need that. So one more thing we always like to ask right at the end. So for the next podcast, like, who's somebody that you would want to be on the panel? Like, who would you be interested in hearing from?
Brian looks like he's just going to throw somebody under the bus right now.
The Easter Bunny.
Well, I'm a huge Christy Harrison fan. She's sitting here, but I mean, I would say that if she wasn't here, I think she is one of the wisest brokers, realtors in the nation, if not the world. She always has a very, we don't agree hardly. Half the time we agree because she's wiser than I am. And she'll be like, but Brian, and then I go, shoot, you're right, and I can't stand it. So I'm always looking for people who make me feel like an idiot, and you don't make me feel like an idiot, but you just really are super smart. I think Bobby Noreen is someone who she's just hilarious because you never know what she's going to say, which is spectacular to me. And Cher Powers, she's just a calming, smart human, so I'd love to hear those three people.
I love those. And for those of you who aren't here, Christy's sitting here and she's like, I don't know if this is a good thing. Like, but we love you, Christy, and we just can't track you down in town. She's like, she flies in, she flies out. So we're going to get you on our radar for sure.
I think it would be, I was talking to Lisa Gaston a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about how she's been in the business for 31 years, and her dad had a brokerage that was where she launched. And I think that's an interesting perspective to see this intergenerational within a family arc of the industry, and what an interesting perspective that must be. And so to have somebody like Lisa, whose son is now joining her team, or Bobby, Noreen, and Teddy, or Neil and Grace Clayton, or just and it might mean 2 people rather than just it might mean 6 rather than 3. But just capturing their perspective on what it's been like to see this long, interesting roller coaster of a history of real estate in Nashville.
Did you see the technical challenges we had with 6 microphones? No. But yeah, that's a great idea.
Well, there's a couple people, and it's based on tech savviness. Like their videos that they're producing, they're more lifestyle videos for listings. It's Tom Sullivan. He's a broker. He does a lot of great properties in Leapers Fork. And then Sam and Steve, they're a father-son duo, and they're great. But Steve, the dad's been around forever, and Sam's a younger agent, but they do these great things with social media, and it's just, you can always learn from that, definitely.
I'm going to add one more. I want y'all to do a female trailblazers. And I want to see Shirley Zeitlin, because she tore down so many walls in this city for women realtors. She was the first president of Tennessee Realtors who was a female. I think there was a lady who was the first African-American black Greater Nashville Realtor board member. She's not a realtor anymore, but I would love to hear her story because I've spoken with her. Sharon? What is it? Okay, so Christy knows the name. I've talked to her on the phone before. Brilliant, but she was a trailblazer. I would love to hear those stories. I'd love to hear what people who were selling, especially our senior members, who remember some of the tough times of selling when everyone wasn't as loved and affirmed in this marketplace as they are now.
I love that. I love trailblazers, and also I feel like history does repeat itself. So even if we sell a different way today or we do things a little differently, the lessons are still there. So but this has been great. So thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the Real Estate Mailbag, and we are looking forward to next time. Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming.